Hi everyone, and welcome to panel 38, New Approaches to Antarctic and Southern Ocean Histories. I'm Nelson Llanos, member of the Hemispheric and Polar Studies Center and professor at Llanos University in Chile. This session aims to showcase some of the many new approaches to the history of the Antarctic and Southern Ocean regions that have emerged in recent years. The important contributions made by historians of science and exploration have increasingly been augmented by studies from environmental history, cultural history and aesthetics, and political history and geopolitics. Among the many positive consequences of this diversification has been a deeper appreciation of how Antarctica and the Southern Ocean have not only shaped the contours of human experience, but have themselves become inscribed with cultural and political as well as scientific meaning. Today, we are going to have some interesting presentations by researchers from Great Britain, Argentina, and Chile, and maybe Romania. We are waiting for them. The session will be recorded to be made available to participants in the past event section of the event platform. The organizers are also aiming to upload the recordings to the SCAR YouTube channel. If anyone does not want their presentation to be made available on YouTube, please let us know. So we're going to a presentation. The title is Approaching Sealing Landscapes, a reflection on places, mobilities, and tasks in 19th century Antarctica by Melissa Salerno and Maria Jimena Cruz. They both are historical archaeologists and researchers at the National Scientific and Technical Research Council in Argentina. Please.
Hi, everyone. Well, thanks for the opportunity of sharing our work. I will share the screen now.
Right.
Oh. ¿Qué pasó? Ah, ahí estaba. Is it okay now? No. Yes. No.
Not yet.
Not yet. Sorry.
It's okay.
I know what is happening.
Try now.
Yes. That's it. Sorry for the delay.
Don't worry. It's okay.
Well, I will start now. Well, the South Shetland Islands were discovered in 1819. News about the abundance of animal resources attracted commercial sailors, the first people to explore and exploit Antarctica. The skins of fur seals were sought for the production of fashion goods, while elephant seal oil was used for lighting, among other purposes. Sailors dominated human presence on the archipelago for over a century. Sealing developed through different cycles, the most relevant one in terms of the number of vessels participating in the exploitation and the amount of resources taken being in the 1820s. Sealers' presence was studied both by historians and archaeologists. Historians have elaborated chronologies of sealing voyages, discussed the role of sealers in early exploration, and assessed the economic value of Antarctic sealing. Meanwhile, archaeologists have approached the material traces left behind by sealers on the islands. Up to date, more than 50 sites, mainly responding to encampments, have been identified. The analysis of the remains found that these locations has allowed researchers to delve into sailors' daily life, focusing on the human scale of an activity mainly carried out by an anonymous workforce. Since 2007, the Landscapes in White research project, of which we are part and which is directed by Andrés Sarankin, has conducted an extensive archaeological program on Livingston Island. research has focused on the analysis of sealers' practices within the framework of an industry operating far away from capitalist centers. Most works have been interested in understanding sealers' subsistence, discussing which aspects of shelter, eating, and clothing, among others, were in charge of companies and which others were left to workers' own devices. Nevertheless, despite a clear focus on capitalism, the project has paid little attention to sealers' engagement with production, especially when compared to other practices. The archaeological study of production is challenging. Animal carcasses left on the beaches were rarely preserved by different factors. Hunting and processing tools represent scarce findings as they were taken to be used elsewhere. Other lines of evidence still need to be thoroughly considered. In view of this, approaches by the Landscape in White project initially had the character of an average. They resorted to scarce remains found at multiple sites to produce a generalization, considering information from published sealers' journals that also have the character of an average, as they amalgamate multiple operations into a single story. The result was the description of the steps involved in hunting and processing. Seals were either clubbed or shot, skinned, and the first salted and pecked out for drying. Elephant seals were clubbed, lanced, and shot, and the blubber cut into pieces and tried out in pots. Although initial approaches provided a general picture of the activity, we are aware that they could also lead us to some interpretative biases. First, average analysis reduces the possibility of discussing variability in production processes. Second, although average studies depend on evidence from different locations, results are often assumed to describe the whole range of operations conducted at the level of a sealing camp. Third, this kind of interpretative leap can lead to involuntarily understand sealing sites as equivalents without a thorough consideration of evidence. Fourth, the site focus can sometimes turn excessively fixed, reducing chances to discuss mobilities and connections among places. Here we present the first steps of a proposal that seeks to discuss the complexity, diversity, and dynamics of production attending to sealing landscapes. Following Tim Ingold, we understand landscape neither as natural nor as symbolical, but as the world as it is known from experience by the people who inhabit it. Dwelling involves practical operations that take their meaning from its position within an ensemble of tasks, carried out in series and or in parallel. This array of activities defines what Ingold calls a taskscape that involves place and mobility dynamics. Places imply a reduction on mobility to conduct a series of tasks. Mobilities are more than the transit between pre-existing points, as places can emerge from movement. Specific tasks can be developed in journeys, and mobilities can have an impact on the tasks performed at specific places. We are not sealers, so it is not easy for us to even imagine sealing landscapes in a systemic scale. While prehistoric archaeology resorts to ethnographic analogies, as historical archaeologists, we have access to written records produced by sealers themselves. In this presentation, we consider the potential of logbooks for providing information on sealing on a daily, not averaged basis, including landings, movements, and arrays of tasks. Logbooks cannot account for all of the dynamics defining sealing landscapes, but we believe that they can warn us on the complexities of production and the need to go back to archaeological remains with new insights to promote a richer dialogue between different lines of evidence.
Next, we will present an exploratory analysis of the logbook of the ship Huron, commanded by Sean Davis, during its second voyage to the South Shetlands between 1821 and 1822. Exploitation was focused on elephant seals, though fur seals were also taken. To approach the sealing landscapes experienced by the Huron's crew, We will consider the places where the gangs landed and the several movements described by the document. In particular, we will assess the range of tasks conducted by the gangs, and we will discuss if the activities carried out at different locations were conducted in parallel or in series, bringing places together. Finally, we will attend to the role of movement in the execution of the tasks. The Huron dropped anchor on Yankee Harbor, Greenwich Islands, a place already known to be safe. While the vessel remained in there, gangs departed on whaleboats with different locations. Some of them landed nearby on the harbor, while some others traveled longer distances. The logbook records 19 landings. Most of them took place on Livingston, followed by those on Greenwich and Desolation. A significant number of landings extended between hours and 2 days, especially including those on Yankee Harbor. Other more distant landings lasted up to 15 days to 1 month. Only one landing on Yankee Harbor extended for the whole state of the Huron of the South Shetlands, proving key to its processing. Elephant seal exploitation at landing locations involve hunting and the first stages of processing, the removal of blubber and its fractioning into pieces. Trying out oil occurred elsewhere. Try works were hard to land and move. They were set on Yankee Harbor, where sealers cut the blubber into smaller pieces, boil it down, and place the oil in casks. Gangs operating on Yankee Harbor used their own boats to take the blubber to the try works. Groups working at more distant locations resorted to the aid of a shallop. As previously noted, fur seal exploitation only played a secondary role. Seals were deliberately sought at 2 locations on Livingston. Notwithstanding, they were often taken at fleeting landings and in an opportunistic manner by some gangs devoted to elephant seal hunting. Although logbook remains silent on most of the activities involved in fur seal exploitation, it does mention salting taking place on board the Huron. This example shows how the sealing landscape experienced by the crew involve places that are not necessarily equivalent. While elephant seals or fur seals were exclusively taken at some locations, both species were exploited at some others. Hunting tasks and the first stations of processing were conducted in parallel at different locations, both simultaneously or not, as the gangs that finished their work at a given location sometimes moved to another one to start over again. Permanence was variable, probably having an impact on shelter and living conditions. The availability of resources, the distance to anchorage, among others, set the pace of the stays. Movement was essential, as places were created in the constant search for resources of a highly extractive industry. Besides places acted in parallel, some locations were connected in series, including sites where elephant seals were killed and those where tripods were set, and sites where fur seals were killed and the vessels acting as a processing, sometimes moving place. The information gathered through this approach can lead to a future assessment of archaeological evidence and a deeper discussion of the array of tasks effectively carried out at specific sites, something that is currently unclear in most cases, the dynamic of movement and the connection between multiple and sometimes even distant locations. Throughout this process, new lines of archaeological evidence will certainly consider it, as well as a deeper dialogue between material remains and documentary sources. This approach also opens up the way for an interesting discussion on how the archaeological heritage of the sealing era could be approached. While conservation and management policies have traditionally focused on sites and monuments as fixed on isolated unities considered to be representative of the past, another option could be ensuring the protection of cultural landscapes as realities that involve more diversity, connections, meanings, and sense that a site could tell, something certainly worth studying as a part of the complex Antarctic history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Is there any question? Very interesting topic, actually. Let me see. Victoria?
Thank you,
Yeah,
Nelson.
Yeah.
Well, first, congratulations on the lecture, Melissa and Jimena. I was wondering about this notion, this conception of place and landscape that goes very well with our perception of space from archaeology. How do you think this notion of place by Ingold can impact on the policies on heritage within the ATS? If you think we can give some input to the CP, or I don't know, how we can make an input on heritage policies.
Mina, can I answer this? Yes, okay. Well, in fact, Ingold works with both notions of place and mobilities, but part of this definition is taken from the mobilities turn and human sciences. So probably it's a concept that links some other things, not only Ingold's contribution, let's say. But what we were thinking about, this notion of place, it is sometimes thought in archaeology as restricted spatially to a location. We believe that maybe the idea of protecting site as an isolated item taken out from space, let's say, probably an alternative to this would be thinking about cultural landscapes in a wider sense. So maybe protection could change its scale from site to landscape, or maybe an area, region, or something like that. Let's say changing the spatial scale. And this is something that is actually being considered. We have been talking with Mike Pearson about this. We have written a work considering this possibility too. Maybe also working with the idea of an ASPAP, so for protection of cultural heritage, something like that. It goes or tries to establish a dialogue with that proposal.
Thank you. Any other question? Melissa.
Sorry, Nelson, there is one
please.
that's come in on the Q&A.
Oh,
has doing this historical work on sealing impacted the way you personally view your relationship with seals and the more than human world?
Mina?
You can go first.
How it changes my perception? Well, about seals, you say? Are you saying?
I
didn't
understood
understand.
that. I understood the question like that, how it changed our perception on sealing based on this new approach.
On sealing or on seals? Sorry, sealing.
The question was your relationship with seals. So it's talking more about seals, and I guess it's talking about your view on the history of how people related to seals and the creatures that live in that sea ice realm. It's okay if you don't want to respond.
No. I'm just thinking about this.
No.
I think that sealing has been seen, or nowadays is seen as a bloody industry. Indeed, it was highly extractive. So it swept away animals from beaches. So that's why they are constantly moving from one island to another one and changing their locations. And they have several landings for each vessel or for each voyage you can record. the thing is that selling for that characteristic or that feature defining it has been also like a little swept away from history accounts, at least general accounts on the history of Antarctica. It like occupies a marginalized place, you know, in that general landscape about historical studies. And I think that what this kind of studies can create is consciousness about the fragility of nature. And also, I must confess that it is sometimes difficult to put me in that place, in the place of the sealer, because we are like objectifying the sources when we study. But if you start thinking about this, and if you start thinking also about information contained in journeys about that describe how they killed not only adult seals, but also the young pups that were there. And the description is like tragic, with their eyes open, like dropping tears, they say. So it really creates a huge impact on your mind. It's something that maybe one cannot imagine. But I don't know, I'm not pro sealing, let's say so. I think this kind of stories just add to what I think. Maybe Jimena can expand on this.
Well, I think that I agree with Melissa, and I think this personally, I think my relationship changed because was something that before studying this, I was not thinking much about the sealing industry. I didn't even know that existed that sealing industry. And when you start studying this, and as Melissa said about these journals, and when you read about this and you see pictures, your relationship starts to change. And it changes even more when you go to Antarctica and you see these animals. And I think it's very interesting to see how this vision about these more than human beings start changing, because in the 19th century, there were objects, there were commodities. And now we are talking about these new views that are very interesting, that consider feeling beings. They are not more animals, they are yes, more than human beings. And I think that's very interesting. We have a work that another colleague made that it's works with this line with symmetrical archaeology, and she studied this approach more deeply about how these animals are not only animals, they are more. And I think, well, that's what I have to say. I don't know if I answered the question.
Thank you very much, Jimena, Melissa, excellent presentation. I think our fourth presentation, I think, is, yes, Architectural and Material History, an Alternative to Antarctic Master Narratives by Victoria Nubiala, from Universidad de Buenos Aires. She's an associate professor of history of architecture and urbanism at the University of Buenos Aires. She has a PhD in archaeology from the University of Buenos Aires, and currently she's developing postdoctoral research on the history of Antarctic architecture and its future as cultural historical heritage. Okay, can you share your screen, Victoria?
Yeah.
Okay. Are you able to do it? Yes.
Yes. And I think
perfect.
I have to put on presentation mode. That's it. Thank you, Nelson. And tonight I'm here is night, so I don't know what time everyone it is right now. I'm seeing, I think Brian is ahead of us. a few hours. I'm presenting on behalf of 6044, which is a group of interdisciplinary research team made by 10 architects and archaeologists and historians. Some of them are listening to the lecture. So, well, for a long time, social sciences and humanities have observed material culture as inanimate objects that rely on humans to exist. However, over recent decades, there has been an extensive recognition among social scientists of the complex networks and engagements that result from dependence of humans on things and things on humans. But when it comes to architecture, the entanglement with human is even more complex. Architecture belongs to the kind of material culture that can be inhabited. In Antarctica, material culture has shown its potential to reveal untold stories, as we already seen from previous lectures, invisible within the realm of written records. Archaeology and anthropology have helped to unveil the stories trapped in the apparently silent existence of materiality. In recent years, architectural research has also shown its potential to cast stories of the Antarctic past. Architecture, as a key part of the Antarctic material world, possesses the ability to reveal layers of information carefully hidden. Here in this picture, we can see the igloo satellite cabin on the left and the Gobi Hat on the right, but also the complex history of design involving these pieces. We can also see the experimental process of Antti and Malcolm Wilhelm and the Futuro house designed by Finnish architect Mai Suronen that we can see in both extra pictures. Having this in mind, the aim of this lecture is to explore and chart the stories of the Antarctic continent through the analysis of architecture design over the last 200 years, paying particular attention to its material dimension. This lecture has been organized in 4 moments, responding to our diachronic analysis in order to identify changes and persistencies over the time. The first moment that we are now seeing takes place during the 19th century and overlaps with Jimena and Meli's lecture and belongs to the earliest occupation of Antarctica. The architecture of Sealer's group placed on the coast of South Shetland Islands could be characterized as heavily relying on local things, spontaneous and versatile. The huts were mainly made of rocks or other local resources, roofed using seal skins and held together by beams made of whale ribs and jaws. Ceiling huts varied in terms of shapes and size, as we can see. They were unique shared living spaces for a maximum of 5 individuals where no social hierarchies were defined or maintained through architecture. And working spaces were mostly built near the living structures. The second moment, was driven by the goal of discovering newer and farther lands. For this reason, most of the buildings were ephemeral or even mobile, such as the case of the vessels. The architecture designs were based upon the main modern architectural principles: functional and decorated designs, standardized and modular building techniques, use of non-local non-local materials such as wood or textiles, and free plan and spaces based on the German notion of existing minimum. Location of most of these buildings, we can change to the next one. Yeah, those. Location of most of these buildings was near to the shore and potential routes to the South Pole. 3 areas can be identified as neuralgic to this architecture. Next one, and next one. Next one, yeah, that's it. That's the Weddell Sea, we can see on the upper part, the Ross Sea and the Commonwealth Bay. However, they were not always permanent, such as vessels and camps were designed to be transported and relocated, which requires self-built architectural objects. The third moment between 1940 and 1960 was characterized by the intention of nations to settle in Antarctic territory. During these decades, 90 stations were built by 15 nations, representing 50% of the whole main buildings ever deployed in Antarctica. Architecture by this time tends to be more extensive, as we can see in the slide, more extensive in the use of the land through building zoning, which is a very usual concept in modern architecture also, or function building segregation require infrastructure to connect buildings. As we can see in the slide, this kind of architecture, it takes a little bit long because it's a gift, but it's going to happen. This kind of architecture allows us a diachronic understanding of the material. Well, here we are seeing kind of, I don't know how to say, this is a plan matching a timeline of Orcada Station, which we designed, well, part of the team designed it. And we can see how all the buildings are related with different historical events and they're appearing on the plan. Most of the buildings use industrial materials, concrete, metal, wood, and glass, and hybrid building techniques with concrete structures, most of them, and wood or metal covering. Permanence is also present in architectural programs, developing a wider range of uses such as those we are seeing now, religious, cultural, and even commercial. Location during this period is very complex, where most stations were built in strategic places, sometimes related to the former territorial claims and other nations' facilities. And finally, the fourth moment, developed between 1960 and the present, we call it the architectural lab. And we are seeing now this beautiful draw we are seeing belongs to a very famous Argentinian architect called Amancio Williams, who was asked to design a city for Antarctica during the 1980s. Within this moment, we can identify two moments. The first one is between 1960 and 1980, and architecture was inspired mainly by experimental experiences developed after the Second World War by younger architects such as Archigram or Ant Farm, and postmodern architecture. And the second movement was strangely inspired by modern architecture, which belongs to 1920s. So between 1960 and 1980s, the architecture was inspired on the future. And right now, actually, our architecture is inspired by old architecture or modern architecture. In both cases, morphological, we can see it right now, the postmodern line and the modern line we are seeing right now in Antarctica. In both cases, morphological exploration and material innovation was crucial, using not only concrete, wood, and glass, but also fiberglass, plastic, or even ice, as we can see in the small chapel Nuestra Señora de las Nieves near to Belgrano Station that was carved on ice by logistic personnel. Also in both movements, portable and ephemeral buildings were produced. While the first movement was centered on science-specific designs and modular buildings that we are seeing right now, associated with the necessities produced by the rise of newer disciplines, exploration of unknown territory through the design of ad hoc buildings associated with scientific stations. And the second movement considered scientific functionality and environmental efficiency at the center of every design. Most of the these buildings are being designed as objects that are deployed through the Antarctic landscape, barely resting on the land. Also, in response to environmental policies, they tend to be designed as compact objects that can be entirely removed from the continent once they become obsolete, or allowing the raising of human footprints. These architectural objects have also implicit the notion of device, developed by modern architects, where buildings are considered as machines designed to be inhabited by human beings. Location during these moments follows a similar pattern of moment 3, mostly located on the coast and with an increasing use of the Antarctic Peninsula. This preliminary exploration of material culture in Antarctica and its complex relationship with humans and the environment resulted in some sort of short biography of this continent. In this sense, we have observed that not only human beings are capable of telling stories about the material world, but the material world has shown us its faculty to tell a story about us. Thank you very much. And the next one is the whole team. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. You're still sharing your screen?
Yeah.
Well, we can see that the entire team there.
Yeah, that's it.
Perfect. Thanks.
You.
Well, we have some minutes for questions. Very good presentation.
Thank you, Victoria. I'd just like to ask, with the early architectural and materials, the designs and materials used, particularly in the 19th century, were they influenced by experiences in the Arctic? Do you know much about the way ideas and technology were transferred to the Antarctic?
Well, in fact, yeah, during the Steelers' time, there was a translation of some of the experience of the Arctic. In fact, most of the experience, I know a little bit more about industrial whaling, but I'm going to answer. Melissa and Jimena can correct me if I'm saying wrong. But yeah, most of the experience. And if you see the architecture until 1920s in Antarctica, most of them have all the information from the Arctic, the techniques, the materials, how to build it. In fact, they also take some, make travels to learn how to use this material. In the case of ceilings, of course, there was not such an experience, but I think they probably have some information. Yeah, probably. I was thinking, I don't know how much they can translate also, because even though the Arctic and Antarctica can be related, also they are very different in terms of the landscape. So, and I don't know how much they can bring to Antarctica. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'd like to make a question for you. I was thinking that in history, architecture has always been associated with national identities. I mean, there is Japanese architecture, you know, French architecture. Do you see something like that in Antarctica? Because the photos currently look very standardized. So can you identify an Argentine special architecture in Antarctica or something like that?
Definitely, yeah. For during the last year, we have been working on the Archive Sur, which collects information and experiences. You are all invited because you all travel to Antarctica, of people who travels to Antarctica to show their experiences on architecture, and they are so different. I mean, you just mentioned Japan. In fact, some of the Japanese stations were designed using the tatami measure. So in fact, yeah, we are very different. I mean, if you go to an Argentinian, Uruguay or Chilean station, you will see some kind of aesthetic inside, and the use is very homey. I don't know how to describe it. It's very different. In fact, we are kind of, I don't know if worry is the word we should be using, but during the last decade, there has been fashion of everybody hiring the same architects to build all the stations in Antarctica, and that it's a hazard to erase some of the cultural marks of architecture. So yeah, I think they have plenty of mark, not only the colors that works like a big flag on the landscape. If you go and see a building painted black, you'll think actually of the UK, or if you see orange, you will think about Argentina and so on. But yeah, they're so different in spaces and the way they design it. So yeah, it's a very nice way to explore cultural diversity in Antarctica.
Right. Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. And I think there's another question. Yes. Yes, there's the question. Do you think architecture can be used to help engage people who never considered the place before with Antarctica? For example, through design competitions?
Definitely, yeah. With Violeta, we teach at the University of Buenos Aires at the Faculty of Architecture, Design and Urbanism. And most of students and professors don't have any idea of what's going on in Antarctica. And for the last 2 years, like more than 30 students have already worked on researching about architecture in Antarctica. Some of the drawings that we show were made by them. So yeah, I think, yeah, thank you, Hannah. It's a great way to engage on taking care of Antarctica, and also about seeing with good eyes our footprint, not only the natural aspects of Antarctica, but our human history of Antarctica, like a way to having, yeah, a nice view of that part of Antarctica.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have one more presentation. I think this is the last one. I'm not sure if Alice Oates is here. I think she's not here. Okay, perfect. So the next one then is History of the Chilean Antarctic Law, 200 years of Chilean policy and rulemaking with an eye on the South, by Dr. Luis Valentin Ferrada, who is a professor of international law at the Universidad de Chile and one of the principal researchers at the Millennium Institute Biodiversity of Antarctic and Subantarctic Ecosystems. He's a member of the Humanities and Social Sciences Standing Committee of SCAR and part of the arbitrators list for Antarctic environmental disputes of the International Court of Arbitration. Dr. Luis Valentin Ferrada.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will share my screen.
Okay.
Okay. I think you can see the screen. Okay. Thank you very much. Good evening, good morning, good midday. All depends where you are. I will make a presentation of researching that I'm been working on that for the last 10 years or more. This is a book. I hope that the book will be published in the first semester of the next year. And this is a general overview of my research about the history of Chilean Antarctic law. The outline of my presentation is in the screen. Some initial remarks. I will speak very few words about the historical background of the Chilean position about Antarctica. I will make an overview of the Chilean Antarctic legal history. I will give some few words about Antarctica in the project really of the new Chilean constitution, and some conclusions. Okay, and I will put the time. It's necessary to make some initial remarks in at least 2 points. The first of them is about what we can understand as history of Antarctic law. The legal history or the history of the law is a subject that really is disputed because some researchers, especially lawyers, think that this is a part of the law subjects, and others, and it's my case, think that's a part of the history. And if you take one or another perspective and point of view, the methodology probably in which you work is different. Of course, it's a mixture between law and legal and knowledge and history, but you can make 2 different approaches to that. About the subject that is studied by the history of Antarctic law, the most of the works that you can read and the most of the research about that is in relation with what we can call international Antarctic law. That's mean the history of the Antarctic Treaty, the history of the Antarctic Treaty system, the different conventions and their application. There are a few, but about the function of the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting and so. And on the other hand, is the history of the domestic Antarctic law. That is, what is the legal regulations in Chile, in Argentina, in UK, in the United States, in France, in different countries about the Antarctic. This area is less developed in general. There are some words, but really just a few. And I believe personally that it's very important to work in this area, especially because it's a new area for the researching. But at the same time, I think it's very important because if we want to be sure that our international agreements are really applicable and are really useful on the ground in the national Antarctic programs and in the different consultative parties, or even in any country, it's not enough to know what happened with the international level. Is also important and essential even what happened in the domestic level. And then to understand what happened in the domestic level, it's necessary to make some research about the story of this domestic law about the Antarctica. The second initial remarks that is important to have on mind is, because we are talking about the Chilean Antarctic law, is about the Chilean position about Antarctic sovereignty in general. As you know, Chile is a climate state, have some very titles about historic and proximity, etc. This is not the object of my presentation, but you need to know that Chile is a climate state, and even if you want to compare this legal history to other legal histories, other domestic legal histories, probably you only will be able to compare between claimant states because they have a special perspective about the Antarctic issues. The second point of view is about what some author call bifocal perspective about the Antarctica after the Antarctic Treaty, in the sense that the climate state at the same time are part and even are very active part of the Antarctic Treaty system, but at the same time based in the Article 4, number 1.a of the Antarctic Treaty, and some declaration that they made in the time they were negotiation or signed or ratified the treaty. They believe, this group of countries, that they have the power to enact regulations and law on Antarctic matters, even the Antarctic Treaty system is running. Very, very fast, some historical background, but I think that is important to consider. The Chilean history or in relation with Antarctica is a very long one. And in this sense, it's important to understand that the existence of the Antarctica was known long before it was incorporated into the world affair in the first part of the 19th century. Indeed, the Ortelius map, very, very well known, is from the 16th century. And of course, Antarctica is not exactly like that, but it's not so different in some manner. And this is important because the most of the history of Antarctica, mainly written in English, sometimes don't consider or just use two lines to describe some aspect that, at least from the Chilean point of view, are very important to understand our engagement with the political and legal interest in Antarctica. These 4 or 5 points, 4 plus 1 really, points I think are very important in the Chilean history about Antarctica. All what happened after the discovery of America between Castilla and Portugal and the division of the world, all the different capitulations or the command that the king give to different conquerors to discover America and even to discover what happened in the other side of the Magellan Strait. And at that time, they think that in the other side of the Magellan Strait was just the running to a pole. Some voyage, especially about Gabriel de Castilla, probably the first ship commanded by him, who was in Antarctica, in the area of the Shetland del Sur, all the voyage of Pedro Fernández de Quirós, and so on. There are two books that I think is very important because they are written and published really in 1752 and 1761, and they expressly speak about Antarctica. This time, as you know, is before that the sailor discovered Antarctica, what is always told about that. And for Chile, it's also very important, some papers, some documents, and some words of Bernardo Higgins. Bernardo Higgins is the founder of the country and the hero of our independence. And he was very clear about the Antarctica, not only about the existence of Antarctica that was incorporated in the world, in the Western world in that time. He was also very secure and right about the right of Chile on that. Then with this background, we can understand why Chile had been so active in ruling on Antarctica. From the middle of the 19th century up to now, Chile had enacted at least 350 acts and bylaws plus 75 budgetary law every year from 1946 until now, every year in the budget law, Chile considers some very important amount of money to the Antarctic expedition, to the Antarctic Institute, to scientific research, to build new bases, etc. But also, Chile have other different 350 different regulations about several different aspects, really. The main of these regulations are the Supreme Decree that fixed the boundaries of the Chilean Antarctic territory, 1940. A second law, which is called the Chilean Antarctic Territory Statute, in 1955. And after that, with the Antarctic Treaty, 1959, start the development of the international law about the Antarctica. First, the treaty, of course. Second, two conventions about sustainable resources exploitation, the Convention of Conservation of Antarctic Seals and the Convention of Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources, and finally, the Environmental Protocol. All these international agreements have been incorporated in the Chilean domestic law, and all the agreements that are adopted every year in the Antarctic Treaty Consultative Meeting and in the meetings of the Commission of the Conservation of Antarctic Marine Living Resources are also incorporated in the Chilean domestic law. But independent of that, Chile keep ruling for different aspects that the authorities, the Chilean authorities, think that are important for different reasons. By some years ago, 20 years ago, really, 20 years ago, it was evident that this big amount of act and bylaw need to be harmonized, systematized, and updating. And some group of people in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs start a work on that, and the result of that was the Chilean Antarctic Law that was enacted in 2020. This law is a framework, a legal framework for all the Chilean activity in Antarctica, but at the same time, this law incorporate in the Chilean domestic regulations different aspects, especially from the environmental protocol. Then this law is a Chilean law in the sense that it has been enacted by the Chilean authorities and the Chilean sovereignty power, but at the same time, is the manner in which Chile accomplished with his different international obligations about Antarctica. As you know, in the last 2 years, Chile has been in a process to write a new constitution. Now we have the proposal of the convention. It will be voted in the first week of September. Then we have still a month of discussions about that. And independent of what someone have different point of view about the constitution, a lot of people is against the proposal, or people support the proposal, but this is not the point. The point is that if we look with a very careful manner the constitution, we can find the article 214, which is especially about the Antarctica. We don't have still the official translation of this article, but they, in some manner, they in the Constitution, and this is very important because the Constitution is the most important law of the country, they update in some manner the political position of the Chile in relation with the sovereignty in Antarctica, but at the same time is very greening in the sense that the protection of the Antarctic environment is a very important element in this new norm. As I said 1 minute ago, we don't know if this constitution, and even including this norm, will be or not at least in force, and will be or not support for the Chilean citizens. But probably if in the next time when we discuss a new constitution, this idea will be in the table, on the table. Some very fast conclusions. One, Chile has a very long legal history about Antarctica of at least 200 years. And this history is very complex in the sense that it covers a wide range of subjects, several different matters. Some of them are more administrative ones, or about economic aspect, or about the resources exploitation, or the organization, or the different institutions, Chilean institutions that work on that, and so on. Some of these norms reflect the international law, but others have been dictated by the Chilean sovereignty power. And finally, this is a most personal conclusion. I hope that in the next semester, my book about history of Chilean Antarctic law will be published. I am working very hard in editing the text, and I hope and I look forward to show you this work, this research, and of course to know your comments about that. Thank you very much, and I think I am on the time. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Luis Valentin. Okay, we have time for questions. Is there any question for Luis Valentin?
Too many law.
I'm not sure because I can't see the whole screen. Okay, but I had a question for you, Luis Valentin. Well, maybe this is not a very good question because we have discussed about this many times. But how would you describe these 200 years of Chilean Antarctic laws, or is it a progressive history, or maybe it's many contradictions, or innovative? How would you describe this in your opinion?
Yeah, I think you can take two lines. One of them is that, unfortunately, from my point of view at least, not all the government have the same opinion about the importance of the Antarctic issues. Then, in some periods, you have a more active government working on Antarctica and, at the end of the day, putting money in Antarctic research, or in I don't know, in build new Antarctic stations, or have a new icebreaker or something like that. Then, in this sense, of course, you have a period with more active, a period more passive. But at the same time, if you look in a long way, and I try to show that in the graph, in the long way, if you put by decades at least, Chile is in a progressive, the Chilean legal, the Chilean legal aspect, or Chilean legal production maybe, is increasingly on the time. But if you go to the details, Of course, there are some governments that support more the Chilean Antarctic activities than others. Yeah.
Correct. Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You are welcome.
Very interesting. I was told that we have a pre-recorded video of Alice Oates. So I think we're going to play the video now. Alice is a PhD candidate in the Scott Polar Research Institute in Cambridge, UK, and her doctoral research focuses on the historical geographies of Britain's Halley's Research Station. So let me ask the SCAR team to play the video. Just a second. Luis Valentin, we have another question for you from Han Nielsen. Thank you for the talk. And do you think other nations need to take a similar approach to the law history?
Yes, I believe that. I believe that. I believe that we need, in general, like as a community, as a community of researchers interested in the historical approach to Antarctica, we need to work more in other countries. Of course, will be very interesting, and then in the second stage, we can make more comparative works between different countries and try to understand why they act in one way or in another. But it's very difficult today to make this comparative studies because you don't have bibliography enough. And of course, always you can go to the database of the different congress and try to find something and all that. But really, I have tried to do that. Indeed, I lead a project about that, and we study Chilean, Argentinian, British, and American, United States law about Antarctica, but it's very difficult for a Chilean lawyer to understand all the process, even in the Argentinian law that is very similar to us, but it's not so similar. And with the British and with the Americans, it's exactly the same. Then we need that people from different countries work on that. And of course, we can speak about that, but I need specialists in their own law working on that, making that, and after that, we can compare.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, here's the video, I think. We're not listening to the video. We cannot hear it.
Has the Zoom been set for share audio before it's played?
No, there's no sound.
Just wait for a minute.
Okay. Did you hear the video, guys? No. Here we go again. Oh, no.
Give us a minute because we are able to hear sound, but I think the voice is not going good to you.
Ursula had to leave. Joy had to leave. They say thank you very much.
Sir, I'm trying from different systems. This system may have some problem. So give us 2-3 minutes. We will sort it out.
Okay. Brian?
Could I ask a quick question, Luis?
Sure.
Valentin? I came across a paper on Roman law, Justinian, talking about what it meant in terms of property that was not being used, the migration of birds and fish and so on. And then the paper went on to talk about how Grotius used this very much to develop ideas when trying to get away from canon law in the Protestant realm of Europe. I'm wondering in terms of the conceptual frameworks for the Roman Catholic nations and their legal traditions. Is that something that's coming up in your research?
I think it's a very, very interesting question. Thank you. Of course, the different legal culture and the different legal approach in the story of the law, the big line or the big divisions in the history of the law have an influence in the understanding of the different countries. When the people who work in the common law think in a different way than the people who work in the continental law, and some of the things that there just a second. It's a very interesting work, a book written by a international legal scholar, Anthony Roberts, who discovered it is international law really international or something like that, and she studied the case of UK, United States, China, and say all the people who work in the Security Council think about the international law absolutely different between them. If you try this discussion to the Antarctic, where we have 29 consultative states with different type of government, different type of economic system, different. Of course, the approach of their legal production is a very. You need to think about this different culture to try to understand why they act in one way or in another. Thanks for the question.
Do we have the video now? I'm just talking with the with the team, the SCAR team.
We are trying, sir. Give us 2 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
When is your book coming out, Luis Valentin?
When I finish the revisions of
Okay.
it. No, I am is almost ready. The Constitution take me more time to think again some points, but the historical part is really I need to read all text. It's about 300 pages until now, plus some appendix. Then I need to read all again. I hope to finish that before of December this year, and then send to the editorial.
Cool.
I am working.
Great.
I am working on that.
Yeah. Okay.
It's never easy. Yeah? It's never easy, as you know.
No, it's not. No video, guys?
Just give me 2 minutes. There is some problem in sharing sound because the video is going on.
Just give us a minute, please.
Hello, my name is Alice Oates. I'm a PhD student.
No sound.
Oh, dear Alice.
I think we have to, I know it's 9 p.m. already here. I think the time is out. Let me try here. Maybe we can watch this video later on platform. I don't know. I can fix it. It's not my, I can manage it. Here we go again.
Hi, my name is Alice. I'm a PhD student at the Scott Polar Research Institute at the University of Cambridge, UK. My research focuses on Halley Research Station from 1956 to the present day, and I'm here today to talk about my e-poster on politics persisting, Britain and the icebreaker issue. This was one of those research wormholes that kind of appears out of nowhere and sucks you in without warning. I was looking through my usual stack of archive records from the Royal Society, and I found a letter from 1959 saying that Sir James Wordie was on the warpath because someone had written an anonymous article in the New Scientist about icebreakers, upsetting, I quote, the Colonial Office's calculations on this matter. This piqued my interest, so I started a bit of digging, and I found an icebreaker-themed trail that led me back to none other than His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, who was very interested in the Royal Society's International Geophysical Year expedition. He travelled to the Royal Society to meet the expedition members before they set off, and while he was there, he asked the Secretary of the Royal Society to look into the feasibility of commissioning an icebreaking ship to be shared by Commonwealth members in Antarctica. This never went anywhere, as far as I can tell, partly because the geographical distance a ship shared by Australia and the UK would need to cover in Antarctica was just too huge to be practical. However, there's a response by Sir Miles Clifford, who had been governor of the Falkland Islands dependencies, and it reveals some of the political considerations at play at the start of the IGY, with which I'm sure we're all pretty familiar at this point. He emphasises continuous administration and also Vassal Bay, which was where the Royal Society expedition was headed. And he says, I quote, that the IGY station is obviously destined to become a regular FIDS base when these exercises are over, unless we are to relinquish this most southerly and scientifically important outpost to Argentina, which is not presumably contemplated. So it's the usual things you'd expect from the British at this point of Antarctic history. Worrying about Argentina and effective occupation, bolstered by wanting to keep hold of the new IGY base at Vassal Bay. It then goes quiet until 1959. Miles Clifford is back, and this time he's writing in the Times. Royal Society base has been handed over to the Falkland Islands Dependency Survey in January 1959, and people are thinking about the tricky conditions of the Weddell Sea and how to travel through those safely going forward. And as far as Sir Miles is concerned, quote, if we are to continue our work in Antarctica, we must provide the proper shipping to support it. So this call to arms, as it were, was picked up by a man called Angus Erskine, who had behind him a significant naval polar career. And again, he writes in the Times. He's incensed that the Trans-Antarctic and Royal Society expeditions had to charter, I quote, foreign ships, and points out that Russia, the US and Argentina all have icebreakers. National pride has begun to enter the conversation. Next, we move to the New Scientist and Wordie's unknown author. This article refers to the Royal Society base, now Halley, and the treacherous ice-infested waters around it, and calls for proof that, quote, British policy in the Antarctic is not all bluff. It's followed up by the ex-Scott Polar Director G.C. Bertram, who says that if we don't get a ship, we, quote, face the reality that politically we are unwilling to maintain our position in Antarctica. Strong words, and then he's backed up by Commander Simpson of the North Greenland expedition. His account is particularly interesting because he makes no mention of the Royal Society or of Halley. He points to the Trans-Antarctic expedition, which was led by Vivian Fuchs and not an IGY initiative, as a, quote, happy reminder that the tradition of Scott and Shackleton is still very much alive, end quote, and to the lack of icebreaker as evidence that politicians, quote, no longer think that the exploration of our Antarctica is worth bothering about. It's fascinating to me seeing Halley disappear from the conversation as national pride and exploration narratives seep back in. It's all the more fascinating because negotiations for the Antarctic Treaty are well underway at this point, and I doubt that any of these elite polar men were unaware that the tide was shifting and that IGY international cooperation was not going away. And yet these values that we associate more strongly with pre-treaty Antarctica are very much still present. In a way, men like Wordie, who sailed with Shackleton and was chairman of the British National Committee for the IGY, are bridges between these two worlds, bringing the old school values with them even as they lead efforts towards international cooperation and scientific excellence. These articles are a snapshot of the persistence of politics into the post-treaty era. However, some voices are conspicuously absent from this debate: the Royal Society and the leaders of its expeditions, David Dalgleish, Robin Smart and Joe McDowell. Where they talk about ships, it's usually about the Norwegian ship Totten and her captain Leif Jacobsen, who successfully carried the Royal Society expeditions down to Antarctica and home again from the advance party to the last relief when the Falkland Islands Dependency Survey took over. And what they had to say was universally positive, both in public and in private. A letter to Jacobsen from the Secretary of the Royal Society says, "Your endeavours on behalf of the Society's Antarctic activities since November 1955 will long be held in high esteem here in the Royal Society, and we are most grateful for all that you have done for us." A Royal Society memo notes that it is mainly due to his skill, experience and constant vigilance that the Royal Society IGY expedition base was set up and has been successfully relieved in succeeding years. And Dalgleish, who led the advance party and never held back when it came to criticising shortcomings of the Crown agents, FIDS or even the Royal Society, demonstrated total trust in Jacobsen when he followed his advice to turn back north instead of pushing further south towards the original goal of the expedition. This trust was based on his experience travelling south with the Totten, and he writes that the captain and mates are really enjoying themselves in their favourite element of ice. "We are so lucky having men who not only have a lifetime of ice experience in the north, but who have been south before. They know what ice to expect, judging it by water skies, its thickness, texture, the colour of water, and even, I can well believe, by smell. Day by day, our admiration and respect for the captain and mates and for the Totten grows." So whether these people would have agreed about Britain's need for an icebreaker is unknown. Their voices are absent from that public debate, and there is no reason that they would have had an invested interest in the post-IGY British Antarctic shipping infrastructure. But we do know how they felt about what they had, which was a non-icebreaking Norwegian ship, and they were very happy to have it, and they got there and back safely every time. So in my research more broadly, I'm using this as part of an exploration of Halley Research Station as a boundary object, a concept developed by Starr and Griesmer. Boundary objects are able to contain multiple viewpoints and have multiple uses without changing themselves, fitting the agenda of individuals and institutions from multiple social worlds. The social worlds of science, geopolitics and exploration all intersect around Halley Station and the IGY in the 1950s and early 1960s. Halley is a powerful tool, whether one's priority is scientific inquiry or geopolitical superiority. It's used by all these actors, stretched and moulded to fit their agendas, and in many different ways, but it remains just one station. Looking at Halley is a window to understanding the shifting situation around Britain's approach to Antarctica in this pivotal moment in history. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed my poster. I'm very happy to take comments and questions over email if anyone has any, and I'd also like to draw your attention to the fact that there is a plain text version of my poster available through the event portal if anyone needs that. Thank you very much.
Well, finally we did it, fortunately. Okay, guys, thank you very, very much for this interesting, provocative, and diverse set of presentations. Brian, Melissa, Maria Jimena, Julia, Victoria, Violeta and your team, who else? Luis Valentin, Alice, Joy, and especially Peder Roberts, who worked very hard for this. He couldn't attend now, but he worked very, very hard. Thank you very much. I'm not sure you want to say something in this final part of the panel. No, okay. Thanks again.
Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot. And I hope that the next time will be personal.
Yeah.
And after that, we will go to take a beer or something like that.
Exactly.
Good idea. Thanks, guys, and see you soon.
Thank you, Nelson. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
See
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.